Hello. I think I've worked out that it's physically impossible for this package to have reached me from Belgium, since I think it was posted on Monday and it's arrived today. Still, here it is. It's a package from Tarot Sheet Revival, and what I expect to find in this package is a copy of Sullivan Hismans' Dodal tarot, or Dodali, to use the Italian name as it appears on the cards. There have been a couple of walkthroughs of this deck already because a couple of preview copies of this deck were released. There are lovely walkthroughs by Louise on the channel Tarot Breeze and by Masha on the channel Musings by Masha. Both of them lovely. I'll try and remember to put the link in with this video so you can go and have a look at those as well. Here we are. Let's have a look. Oh, there are things in here. Oh, there are many, many things in here. Oh, Lord. Okay. Here are the other cards that Sullivan has included in with the package. Here we are. Jean Dodali Tarot. Fait pour l'étrange, made for export in France in around about 1701, sometime between 1701 and 1715. Yeah, that's the cover card for that. This is a couple of spares of what I think are from the same deck. The Valet de Denier, the Devil, and the Knight of Coins. That's a preview of what's coming up. And as usual with Sullivan Hismans, he's put in some cards from his other decks, which is so lovely. These are from the Budapest Tarot, which I have. There's a blank. There's some from the Rosenwald Tarot. And there's his business card there, which is lovely. Thank you very much, Sullivan. And as usual, the deck comes very, very securely packaged. This deck is published now in two forms. There's a hand-painted version, which is very lovely. I gather I haven't seen any copies of that. And this is the printed version in a first limited edition of 400 copies. As always with Sullivan Hismans decks, it's got this lovely version of the wrapping, which replicates the style of wrapping you might have expected to buy a pack of cards in the 18th century, 17th and 18th century, which is lovely. And it's the wrapper itself is hand painted with that lovely lion and unicorn motif there. That's gorgeous. And his monogram TSR Tarot Sheet Revival down there. Let's open up and see what is inside. I'm going to say straightforward at this point that in my opinion Sullivan Hismans is the best card maker of tarot cards in the world today. I know that's a big thing to say, but for my money there is nobody else can touch him for the way in which he reproduces or recreates historic tarot decks. The only person that I think is doing something similar is Pablo Robledo, who I think works out of Argentina. Some stunning work, but I still think that Sullivan Hismans is in a league of his own, and there is absolutely nobody to touch him for the work he's doing at the moment. He's produced a couple of decks before, the Budapest and Rosenwald Tarots, and this is his, I think his third, unless he's been doing things that I don't know about. There are other editions of the Dodal Tarot. This deck, like I say, published in Lyon around about the beginning of the 18th century. There was a version done by Jean-Claude Flournoy a few years ago, before his sad and very untimely passing on. And I think there are others as well. In fact, I think Pablo Robledo's done a Dodal. I'm not sure. But this, like I say, I think is in a league of his own. We are not talking a cheap deck here. This is quite an expensive deck, I think, although I know there are some more so. But this is a question of the highest possible quality and scholarship and just general love of the work that I think I could possibly hope for. I'm going to go through it in a slightly different order. I'm going to readjust things slightly, and first of all, turn it the right way up, and secondly, I think I'm going to start with the majors because I've got something else to show you in regard to the majors. Excuse me while I rejig. Right, here we are, and I'm just going to go through the majors. I might flick through the minors if the video doesn't go on too long, but mostly I'm just going to show the majors because they've got pretty pictures on them. And we begin with the Fool. Now, here's something that I mean about Sullivan Hismans' way of doing these restorations and recreations, in that he has been exceptionally faithful not only to the original line drawings but also to the colours used in a stenciled colour finish. And in particular, one thing that struck me about previews of this deck that I'd seen is this odd feature that you get on some decks of this period where this dark greyish blue colour often fades slightly around the edges. This was something that I noticed when I was studying last year, studying the anonymous Tarot de Paris, that on some of the cards, like I say, this dark greyish blue doesn't seem to fill the area, it fades. And I think uniquely, Sullivan Hismans has tried to reproduce that effect. Now, I don't know if this is coming over on the camera. The light isn't great in here, but the colours on these cards are breathtaking. They really are. He's gone for a palette of colours that I think probably very accurately represent colours that were used in printing at the time. They've got a look about the colours that convincingly reproduce the kind of colour palette you'd have got before the invention of chemical dyes in the 18th and 19th centuries. The more muted dyes that were obtained from natural sources. So, for instance, this slightly orangey, slightly dull yellow there, beautiful rust red, and again, you know, these faded grey blues and the other colours there are very beautiful indeed. Now, another thing that he's done as well is he's reproduced the fact that the stenciling wouldn't have produced perfectly flat areas of colour. And let's see if we can see that. Yeah, sorry, you can see on the Fool's backpack there and on his collar and there that the colours that Sullivan Hismans have done are slightly not flat. There is colour variation across that bit of stenciling there, and that gives the work so much more character and so much more depth than just a modern flat area of colour would have given it. These are amazing. To illustrate, let's have a look. There's the magician. Let's have a look at the magician. Let's get him in a good light. That's the best light I can get here at the moment. And you can see as well, he's reproduced what actually look like mistakes in the stenciling, which I think is great. Here again is that sort of varied colour effect. And now into the frame, let us bring the original Jean Dodal tarot. This is a downloaded image from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris, where you can browse the images. You can go online and browse the images at the Bibliothèque Nationale. And you can just see there, it's just perfect. It's beautiful. Obviously the library stamp has been, Sullivan has removed that. There's some spots of aging spots on the card that have been removed. And apart from that, really all he's done is to restore the colours to what they would have looked like before they faded. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just astonishing? It almost chills down the spine that, you know, here in my hand I'm holding something that I think is the closest recreation of a piece of early 18th century folk artwork like this that I think I've ever seen. I could just sit here and hold this in front of the camera all day and just let you marvel at it like I am doing, because this is amazing. I've done it for a couple more. There's the magician there. Isn't he beautiful? High Priestess. Look at the richness of those colours in the robes. Isn't that just astonishing? One thing I've noticed here is that restorers seem to differ on their opinion of whether they should reproduce that, what looks like a little mole on her cheek, and Sullivan Hismans has done. I think there's one other version of this where that's taken to be a mistake and is removed. I think it's just purely charming, and it's lovely that Sullivan has reproduced it. And there again, the colours are phenomenal. You see, he hasn't reproduced the colours exactly, but I think he has given the best impression I have ever seen of how those colours would have looked in the original printing. The Dodal, of course, is Tarot de Marseille Type 1, which has features that, you know, you can look up here on YouTube, and there are plenty of places where people go through the differences between Type 1 and Type 2. And it's noted for things like its eccentric spelling, like back there with the High Priestess, it's La Princesse. Here's the Empress. And again, comparing her with that Bibliothèque Nationale original. Sullivan, you've done it again. You have absolutely done it again. This is astonishing. And now we're getting up to 15 minutes. So I'm really just going to flick through the rest of the majors here. Honestly, I could spend hours looking at this. Hours and hours and hours. I probably will this evening. Tarot Type 1, Marseille Type 1, the Emperor faces that way usually, and the Dodal has this odd little thing of what looks like a number 4 floating in the middle of the air there, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I've read theories about that, one theory, it's like the woodcarver's monogram and not an actual number 4, but I don't know what the consensus is on that. Pope. And another feature you often see on Type 1 Marseille is that instead of holding the staff with the triple cross, it's more like a traditional bishop's crozier. Isn't this just stunning? On that, that's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'll just stop talking because I'm literally speechless at this. It is so lovely. So lovely. Look at how rich the colours are on the hermit's mantle there. Wow. Now this is interesting. Now I've heard the blurb about this. Here we are. We get to the Hanged Man and the card is upside down. Mistake? No. The degree of research which Sullivan Hismans does, he has looked at the backs of the cards and how they're printed, and has deduced that on the original wood block, which we no longer have, the image of the Hanged Man was actually that way up. Now obviously that makes no sense at all from a reading point of view and from actually using the cards. My theory about that is actually it probably is easier to, if you're carving a number of wood blocks and there might have been 16 or 20 images all on the one block, if you were carving a load of human figures, cards with a load of human figures on them, it kind of makes sense. If you're carving one that is meant to be upside down like that, you might actually just reverse the image when you're carving and do it that way up because it's easier. If you're carving if you're standing here and carving, it's probably going to be easier to carve a figure that way than actually imagine what it looks like upside down, if you see what I mean there. I'm going to leave it that way up for the time being. Why not? That way up, sorry, for the time being. One of the earlier decks that we still have, the Jean Noble from 1650-ish, has death named La Mort down here, but here we get to Jean Dodal, and he's taken up the practice that would become standard on most Marseille decks of not naming the death card. Even when you get to things like some of the decks that are derived from the Sopraffino decks in the 19th century, this card will be called something like Il Tredici, the 13th, instead of calling it death, which by that time was for sort of superstitious reasons. I'm sure my camera isn't picking these images up as gorgeously as they look looking past the camera into what they look like in my hand. They are phenomenal and amazing and wonderful, and I'm so glad I got this deck. Wow. Sullivan Hismans is a truly amazing person. And he has done a truly amazing job on this yet again. Everything he makes is just gold. One very last thing I'll do is that I can never remember which cards these are, but there are several cards. I know the Ace of Batons is one, where he's noticed that there's a slight difference between the version of the deck that is preserved in Paris and the version that is preserved at the British Museum in London, whose website you can also browse. And there are very slight differences. So where those differences exist, he's given us both. So there's a duplicate, not duplicate, but two slightly different versions of the Ace of Batons. I think it's one of the pages as well. Is it the page of Batons? Yeah, it's a page of Batons as well. Valet de Baton, which are slightly different. You can see the difference in the faces there. That's odd. I mean, presumably what that means is that what we've got in Paris and in London is printings of the deck that were done at different times and where probably there's been some damage to one of the wood blocks, and that's been repaired, and it's meant that the two versions are slightly different in a handful of the cards. So I won't walk through the whole thing, of the video is going to get very long. There it is, the Dodal or Dodali Tarot by Sullivan Hismans of Tarot Sheet Revival, limited edition of 400. I've got number 14. Sullivan, thank you very much indeed. This is very beautiful and will be a great pleasure to work with and to play with for a long time to come. Thank you very much, and thank you all for watching.